In the 1946 film It's a Wonderful Life, legendary actor Jimmy Stewart plays George Bailey, a starry-eyed young man with hopes of exploring the world, going to college, and becoming a big-time builder.
And a year after that, I'm shaking the dust of this crummy little town off my feet, and I'm gonna see the world.
Throughout the film, Bailey is constantly trying to escape his fictional, all-American small town of Bedford Falls. At the start of the film, Bailey doesn't understand why his father wasted his life away, fighting tooth and nail to keep his small building and loan business going against the Goliath that is Mr. Potter, a money-hungry monopolist that owns every other financial institution in town. When someone falls on hard times, doesn't qualify for a loan, or is late on a payment, the Baileys understand and are willing to help because they are a part of the community. They won't make decisions solely based on their bottom line. Just as George is about to fulfill his dream of sailing off to Europe, then on to college, his father suddenly dies of a stroke. Mr. Potter is on the board of the building and loan company and wants to see it dissolved now that the old thorn in his side, Mr. Bailey, is dead. The rest of the board, however, votes to continue the company only if George Bailey takes his father's position. Here, he forgoes his own personal interest in favor of responsibility to his community. He even gives his younger brother the money that he himself had saved up for college.
What'd you say just a minute ago? They had to wait and save their money before they even thought of a decent home? Wait for what? Until their children grow up and leave them, until they're so old and broken down that you know how long it takes a working man to save $5,000? Just remember this, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? Anyway, my father didn't think so. People were human beings to him, but to you, a warped, frustrated old man, they're cattle. Well, in my book, he died a much richer man than you'll ever be.
George Bailey, at the start of the film, holds a starry-eyed worldview, one that is not yet burdened by the responsibilities and struggles of adulthood. As the film progresses, Bailey becomes resentful of the town and family he fought so hard for, resentful that he never got to pursue his dream. George's uncle Billy misplaces $8,000 that were supposed to be deposited from the building and loan company to the bank, and the lost money ends up being taken by Mr. Potter. When he finds out about this, the distressed George Bailey doesn't even hesitate to take the fall for his uncle, knowing he'll be imprisoned for fraud and embezzlement that he didn't commit, for the loss of money through no fault of his own. He realizes that he has a $15,000 life insurance policy with $500 equity, and Potter tells him,
"You're worth more dead than alive."
A father who has failed to provide, and who sees his place in his family as primarily a source of financial security, the idea of being worth more alive than dead sets off an unfortunate light bulb. Bailey decides to commit suicide so that his family can cash in on his life insurance policy and escape from the financial ruin he feels he left them in. All those years of honest work, nothing to show for it. God sends down Clarence, an angel looking to win his wings, to talk George Bailey off the ledge. When George says the world would be better off without him, Clarence shows him exactly that. A world in which he never existed. The result is Pottersville, a perverse distortion of the wholesome Bedford Falls that Bailey had fought so long to keep going. It's a Wonderful Life is a deeply anti-modern artwork, fighting for a past America that seems further and further away. George Bailey, the honest, community-oriented businessman, was the one thing standing between the America of old and the hedonism of modern life. As much as the film espouses a conservative worldview, I think that its primary argument is one of communitarianism, The idea that you should look out for your neighbors and that individuals matter within their community. At the end of the film, when George has a change of heart and returns to the present, it's the very community he had served for so many years that steps in to save him. The whole town comes together and pitches in to keep George out of jail. It's a beautiful ending to a beautiful film, but there's something quite sad about it when looking at it from a modern context. Many of us don't have that sense of community anymore, no sense of camaraderie with those that live around us, because we find community elsewhere, whether that be with those we share common interests with on the internet or friends and family that live in different places. Religion has also declined significantly in the United States in the last 100 years. And regardless of your opinion on that, it's clear that many strong local communities were based in the church, communities that appear less and less relevant in people's everyday lives. It's a Wonderful Life omits the issues with small town life. It can be suffocating and toxic. Ask how a gay person or a trans person would have felt in Bedford Falls. The countless Americans that were stopped from living as themselves just because of where they were born. Pottersville is, in reality, a stand-in for liberalism. The wholesome small town streets are filled instead with bars, strip clubs, and casinos. The film's director, Frank Capra, was a lifelong conservative, but the portrayal of the deeply capitalistic Mr. Potter as a villain got Capra investigated by both the FBI and the House Un-American Activities Committee. Obviously, this is ridiculous. It's a Wonderful Life is a quite conservative movie, but it's also communitarian. It advocates for people to set aside their individual interests in favor of the public good, while simultaneously believing in the power of the individual to make a positive impact. It advocates for support of your fellow man, not through big New Deal style government programs, but instead through the strength of local communities and generous men such as George Bailey. Personal responsibility over personal indulgence. Frank Capra holds a remarkable reverence for the American character. The Italian-born filmmaker who came to the United States when he was 6 years old was an American in every way, though his immigrant status allowed him to view American culture through the perspective of an outsider. Capra had to fight for his American identity, to be part of this world that he venerated. Thus, his work reflects this romanticized notion of good old-fashioned American values that need to be conserved and maintained. It's important to note that in It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey, as a good American, helps out a family of Italian immigrants in his community that have fallen on hard times and gives them the chance to buy a brand new home and fulfill the American dream. It's a Wonderful Life is a deeply anti-modern artwork, fighting for a past America that seems further and further away. George Bailey actively decides to make less money in favor of the common good. I know there's already someone in the comments complaining that I took a universally beloved film and made it political, but I would argue that all film is political, especially this one. If you look at Frank Capra, he clearly went into his work with a political worldview in mind. In his 1971 autobiography, Capra wrote that practically all the Hollywood filmmaking of today is stooping to cheap, salacious pornography and a crazy bastardization of a great art to compete for the patronage of deviants. It's a Wonderful Life serves as a moral education, upholding those wholesome American virtues that Capra believed in. Capra's films like It's a Wonderful Life, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and Meet John Doe reflect a strong belief in American ideals. Meet John Doe stars Gary Cooper, who like Jimmy Stewart embodied the idealized square-jawed all-American man, an image that was never real and that modern men could never live up to.
Let me tell you something. Nowadays, everybody's got to go to shrinks and counselors and go on Sally Jesse Raphael and talk about their problems. Whatever happened to Gary Cooper, the strong, silent type? That was an American. He wasn't in touch with his feelings. He just did what he had to do. See, what they didn't know was once they got Gary Cooper in touch with his feelings, that they wouldn't be able to shut him up. And then it's dysfunction this, and dysfunction that, and dysfunction my fungal.
The Sopranos is a show about American decay, a world where the glory days of the mafia are behind us, and mobsters are left to struggle in the complexity of the modern world, dealing with issues such as anxiety and depression, failing to live up to the idealized standard of masculinity. It encompasses the desire to return to a simpler time, and a frustration at oneself for falling short. George Bailey represents the ideals of the perfect business owner, this generous community man that helps out the people around him and is charitable. Before making It's a Wonderful Life, Capra stated, "There are just two things that are important. One is to strengthen the individual's belief in himself, and the other, even more important right now, is to combat a modern trend towards atheism." He summarized his approach to filmmaking as first, to exalt the world of the individual, to champion man, plead his causes, protect any degradation of his dignity, spirit, or divinity.
Nearly 79 years ago, I celebrated my 6th birthday in the black, dark hole of a creaking ship crammed with retching, praying, terrorized immigrants. 13 days of misery. And then the ship stopped. And my father grabbed me and carried me up the steep iron stairs to the deck. And then he shouted, "Chico, look at that." At first, all I saw was a deck full of people on their knees, crying and rejoicing. My father cried, "That's the greatest light since the Star of Bethlehem." I looked up, and there was the statue of a great lady, taller than a church steeple, holding a lamp over the land we were about to enter. And my father said, "It's the light of freedom, Chico. Remember that. Freedom." So, finally, there is something I must say to some other members of my family, and I believe that they will hear me. Mama, Papa, Big Brother Ben, Josephine, Tony, little sister Ann, remember the day we arrived at the Southern Pacific Station here in Los Angeles, and Papa and Mama kissed the ground? Look, the American Film Institute has given me its Life Achievement Award. And for that, I am thanking them and all my friends who have come here. But for America, just for living here, I kiss the ground. Thank you very much.
Just as we, in the 2010s, experienced a huge wave of 80s nostalgia, expressed both in our popular culture and in the figures we elect, so did the late 70s and 80s experience a similar wave of 50s nostalgia. Look at Back to the Future, released in 1985, a film where the main character literally goes back to the 1950s and experiences all of the aesthetics of that era that had become so romanticized. In the 1970s, director George Lucas made dark indie movies that reflected the mood of the era. But as the decade went on, he had a change of heart. He had fallen in love with film as a child through serials like Flash Gordon. Simple, fun adventure stories colored in with black and white morality. Harrowing tales of good versus evil. Now, Lucas wanted to make something for kids that was positive and inspiring, like the serials of his youth.
The comic books and comic art is a really strong and very close to the pulse of the culture kind of art. And it's really a cultural signpost of the times in which it was drawn, which is, to me, the most important aspect of art. And I think it has it's a lot more important than, say, New Hampshire landscapes or anything like that. I mean, it really tells you what's going on in a country or what the people are feeling at a particular moment in history.
Don't get me wrong. For all of its broad cultural appeal, Star Wars is a very political artwork. Lucas himself will tell you that.
Could you did something very interesting with Star Wars, if you think about it. The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Ironically, Star Wars' anti-imperialist conception and criticism of American power provided a framework that was appealing to classic American ideals. Our founding myth is central to our self-conception, the ragtag group of Yankees vanquishing the behemoth that is the British Empire. We are the most powerful nation in the history of the world, with an underdog origin story that informs our national character. A 1992 article in the Journal of Pop Culture by David Meyer talked about the strong appeals that Star Wars had to the American public. The technical wizardry of Lucas's team explained some of this popularity, but clearly the movie touched a deep nerve as well. It gave expression to popular myths in American culture. The heroic rebels succeeded by virtue not of technological advantages, but through greater commitment, diversity, and justness of cause. Luke appeared to be both a common man and a master of science, much as Jimmy Carter, the peanut farmer and quote-unquote nuclear engineer, did in his presidential campaign. The heroes sought independence, not dominance, and personal affiliation was always a stronger motivation for action than obedience or ideology. Technology was less trustworthy than some mystical sense of self, and small was most assuredly beautiful. Earlier in this video, I mentioned the desire to return to a simpler time being symbolized through classic Hollywood depictions of masculinity, such as Jimmy Stewart and Gary Cooper. What if we could get that kind of man in the White House, who played to a classic Americana sort of nostalgia? Steve Bannon said that politics is downstream of culture, and well, Ronald Wilson Reagan was the person going down that stream. The actor turned political superstar would become the most transformative figure in American politics since Franklin Roosevelt. Reagan offered a return to a black and white morality, a simpler America, a more idealized America, like that of your youth. The politics of nostalgia are powerful. The slogan, "Make America Great Again," used first by Reagan and later by Donald Trump, appeal exactly to this form of nostalgia, that of some bygone era where people like you were on top. It's no coincidence, of course, that just as Ronald Reagan was a figure from the 50s who had a political resurgence in the 80s, so too is Donald Trump a figure from the 80s that had a resurgence in the 2010s. Film and television have been instrumental to modern American myth-making. From the all-American man that we all fall short of, to the fictional frontier cowboy of the Wild West, or the logical conclusion of that type of character in space. They're all important aspects of our self-perception. When men feel left behind or alienated in our politics, it makes sense that we would search for past notions of masculinity to guide us forward. An aspect of our politics that I feel is very under-discussed. What will you add to the discussion? Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. This was actually supposed to be a part of a much bigger project, but it's taken me a lot longer than I expected it to, and it felt like its own separate thing, so I decided to put it out as its own video. Make sure to let me know what you think of it in the comment section down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Special thank you to our patrons and YouTube channel members, Bobbletopia, Michael Lowe, John Reynolds, Luke Johns, Braden Selby, Simon Pusateri, Extra, Kenneth Choi, Crib Steck, Quack, J Reaction, and Matt K. Your guys' support makes my work on this channel possible. If you're feeling generous, you like the work I do here, and you want to help out, you can become a patron or a channel member as well for as little as $1 a month. A like and a subscribe also goes a long way in supporting the work that I do here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and look forward to the future video coming out.